Hello, it is on this day, February 22nd, 2023, not 22, that I finished Neverwhere by Neil Gaiman. This book was not what I expected. And I would elaborate on what I did expect, except I don't know anymore. I don't know what I expected. I don't think it was even like a full thing I expected. I just knew that I respected the author and wasn't really prepared for what this was. So we'll hop right into non-spoilers and talk about all that. The beginning of non-spoilers, though, will mostly be talk of like details about my understanding of the book, and then we'll get into like my opinion and the things I liked and what I have to say about this book in non-spoilers. So, the first thing I'm going to say is that I am not knowledgeable in London or most of Europe. I'm really not, and it's sad, and I wish I knew more, and I do want to learn more at some point, but I knew nothing about London coming into this book, and a lot of this book is kind of linked to London. There's a lot of setting commentary about London that people who live there or have been there before can probably follow and find enjoyment in. But since I haven't even read another book that takes place in London except for Mrs. Dalloway, which that book was also hard for me to read, a lot of it flew over my head, and so before we get into non-spoilers and my opinion and everything like that, I just wanted to be clear that I am not knowledgeable in London, and I'm not going to be able to comment a lot on all the commentary the main character has about London, because I can compare it to some of the cities I know, but I also myself haven't lived in a city long enough to have the perspective the main character has on his city, because I was a military kid. I didn't live anywhere long enough. So keep all of that in mind, and if I say something wrong or if I mess up like a location or name, like I'm gonna mess it up, period. Now that that's out of the way, the second thing I'm going to say about this book is it turns out that I struggle with Neil Gaiman's prose, and I think it's due to two things about me. The first thing is the fact that I have aphantasia. That is the lack of ability to picture things in your head. I can't do that most of the time, and when I do, it's like really rare, and sometimes I can get full images, but definitely not with this book. I couldn't picture any of the things he was saying, so that made me struggle with like understanding what I was reading. And the second thing is that when a sentence gets off track multiple times, I can't link back on track. So I don't know how to describe that other than like a sentence formatting style. It's not incorrect grammar, it is correct grammar oftentimes, but it's something that my brain can't follow because of the grammar it's written in. I know other people can perfectly fine. I'm just someone where I need the sentence to stay on the same subject, and I usually will do like the start a sentence and then like comma, and then like something else or like a parenthesis, and I can do that fine, but when you do that like 2 or 3 times in a sentence, I can't follow it anymore. And so right off the bat, like in the first few chapters of this book, literally like the prologue and chapter 1, I knew that I was going to struggle with reading the prose, just because of how I am as a person. It's not the fault of Neil Gaiman, it's just my ability to read. So I want that to be known as we go into more commentary, that I didn't start off on the right foot, if I guess we'll say, when it came to this book. I kind of started off being like, oh no, I'm worried I won't like this. And I was worried I wouldn't like the book overall because of that. Now, I can tell you now, I do like the book overall, but I don't like it as much as I think I would have if I had a different way of reading or a different perspective or etc. I think I could have liked it more, but I think my reading style kind of limited me in how much I could like the book. So that's sad, and I'm sorry. It's unfortunate. I'm so used to like long-winded, big descriptions of like every detail, and used to everything being explained to me and not having to put the pieces together myself. And this was the first book that's challenged that in quite a while. So, I'm sorry, Neil Gaiman. It's a good book, I promise. How I think and stuff like that weren't necessarily compatible all the time. I did find a solution partway into the book, around chapter 3? These are some huge chapters. When I say chapter 3, this is like already like here. Like, these are some big chapters. I think chapter 3 was when I got the hold for the audiobook via the library, and the audiobook is read by the author himself, and he does a great job at narration. I will say my biggest complaint about the audiobook is the static voice changer he uses, because I could not tell a word he says when he uses it. And I get that that's the point, but also I want to be able to hear the person reading the book. And sometimes the echo was the same thing, where like I get you're using an echo effect, but it's hard for me to hear you or focus on the words you're saying when you're using an echo effect. Again, that's a me thing because how my brain works. I'm sure other people enjoyed it, and I like the idea of it. I just sometimes had to re-listen to it multiple times to be able to hear what he was saying. Other than that, though, it put a piece together for me. Like all the things that weren't working when I was reading the words, listening to him say the sentences in the cadence he wants it to be read made it make more sense to me, and so that format was much, much better for me. And so I read the rest of the book in the audiobook format. And that helped a lot. There's still where sometimes I had to re-listen to a scene a few times to be able to grasp what he was describing or saying or something like that. But overall, it brought a lot more of the pieces together. So most of the commentary I have is from an audiobook format of Mind. Now we actually get into non-spoilers, and you'll see why I mentioned the audiobook format in Mind. This book is like a storytelling kind of feeling. Now I wish I had another book to compare that to that isn't Princess Bride, because Princess Bride is a wrong example, but I don't have another like storytelling feeling kind of book. Actually, I think I had one. Oh my god, what was it? There's a book I reviewed in like the last year that was like that. Let's see if I can remember. 1 second. Oh, it's the Belgariad. It was the Belgariad. The Belgariad's narration had a style that made it feel like you were in a story, and the way the narrator read Belgariad made it even more feel like someone was reading a story to you. And that was one of the huge keys to me loving Belgariad, was how the narrator read it. This book was similar in that how Neil Gaiman read it and how it reads when a person is reading it to you, with like the voices and the perspectives and the lilts and accents and all of that. It hits differently, and it makes it feel like a story as you're going through it, especially with like the formatting and the fact that you're in this kind of third-person omniscient perspective. It's like you are generally following certain groups until you're not, until you're with someone else. Continuing. Because of that, like the omniscient kind of storytelling, and because of the way it's formatted, which I'll give an example in just a bit, it feels like you're being told a story, but not in the same extent as the Belgariad. It's more of a, you're following the main character around, and I will call him like the main character, and because of the kind of story it is, again, I'll give an example in a minute, it emphasizes the storytelling, but it's not outright like someone is completely telling you the story, like with Princess Bride. So all of that is to say, it does come across as a story, just not to the extent that some other books do. And it does really add on to the story. It's about Neverwhere, and given the title of the book, like, you can kind of get the vibe. It's like Alice in Wonderland or like Wizard of Oz. Like, you know, you're going to be exploring this other world with someone who's not used to that world. And I think those stories are very interesting, and they have their own appeal in their own right. And so if you want like a general like vibe of what Neverwhere is, I would say like think of it as like Alice in Wonderland or Wizard of Oz kind of format, like kind of idea. You're following a character we know in a world we know, go to a world we don't know. But I don't know where I was going with but. Period. That is the kind of impression you have. It's just not to the extent as those books. So that's the general vibe. Now, earlier I said I was going to give an example of like one storytelling phrase that Neil Gaiman uses. Throughout the book, he'll describe things with like little one-sentence details, and he doesn't actually outright describe anything. Like, he just gives you some like mini details to remember people by, rather than describe what they look like. And so when we meet certain characters near the beginning, you only know like 4 details about them. And then sometimes Neil Gaiman will just add, and none of those things apply, or something like that. So he'll say like, this character was like blank, 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 and blank, and wasn't any of those at all. Or like say, it looked like a boar and a bear and what's another animal? A wolf. And it was none of those things, or it looked like none of those things. So sometimes having that kind of storytelling where he's explaining things and he's like going against the things he explained or elaborating on the things he explained, it emphasizes that like storytelling kind of format. And it really makes you like keep track of these different details in a way, or it makes you throw away these details as they come. So it's very interesting how that interaction works throughout the book. I don't have more words to elaborate what it's like. It's one of those things that you have to read it to find out. But I did like that. I think it really added on. And with his pronunciation of things, it also added on. And then, parallel to that, I mentioned following the main character into the world he does not know. I just want to add on, in non-spoilers, that the main character is a lovable goofball, and I think that... goofball's not the right word, but I'm not going to elaborate. I think that he's a level of relatable, but like not completely, and he's kind of our guide in the story, in a way. I'm not going to have any certainties in this video, if you haven't noticed. Like, I'm going to describe things roundaboutly, which is honestly how this book is. It follows things roundaboutly, and you have to kind of put it together as you go. But he is lovable, and I think it's just the kind of person he is, how endearing he is, that makes him really stick out as a main character. So, he is lovable just because he is who he is. And throughout the book, you can see him being who he is until he isn't, until he reaches his rounded bit. And then you start to feel that like connection to him especially. So very interesting interaction, especially towards the end when you start to get into themes. But I'm not so certain on the themes, so I'm not going to comment on themes. Again, similar to not being able to comment about London, the themes of this book were just out of my grasp, and I'm not confident enough to talk about any of them, really, which is sad, but that's just how I am. With all that said, I'll hop into spoilers. And hopefully this won't be too long, because my roommate needs the room. So, spoilers, this is your time to leave, so we can talk about my favorite character, because I don't even have, like, getting into spoilers, I don't even have the reasons why this guy is my main character. He's just the marquee. I mean, like, everything about what he is, like, is a sign that he will be my favorite character, but I could not explain to you why. I just know that characters of the personality of the Marquis de Carabas, he says it differently every time, and in the short story after the book, he flat out says he says it differently every time. So I'll just say the Marquis for the sake of this video. Everything about him is just going to be someone I love. Period. He's just my favorite character. And I will say that that scene where he was like just chilling out in Krupp and Vandemar's little hideout, the hospital, like forgotten hospital area. Him just sitting in there waiting for them to come in and then trying to trick them. Great moment. That was probably my favorite Krupp and Vandemar moment, which gets into my next point, but I'm not going to get there yet. That moment was really badass, and that was the one moment that like really sold it to me. Like, yes, I love the Marquis. I already had an idea from like how he talks and like how he collects favors and how he interacted, didn't have a great relationship with the Earl and got kicked out. Like all of those things, they were all adding on, and I liked a lot of the personality and that stuff, but when that scene hit, that's when I really realized, like, yes, this is probably my favorite character, period. I do love Dor. I love her in her own way. I love her through Richard's eyes, if that makes sense. But really, like, after I finished the book, I was really thinking about, like, how much I know about Neverwhere. Like, about, like, under London below. I feel like I don't know anything about these people in a way, and I think that's weird. That's a feeling I haven't had in a long time, where I finish a book and I feel like I know nothing about the characters. And I wonder if that's just a side effect of being used to having these massive series I read, where I stick with the same people forever, versus having a standalone where you only know them for 20 chapters. I don't know if that's it or if it's something else, but leaving the book, I feel like I don't know anything about Dor or much about even the Marquis. But the Marquis did have a short story at the end, which I feel elaborated more about him. But there's a part of me that like really likes the mystery of not knowing about the characters, but there's also a part of me that's just not used to it, is what I'll say. He's still my favorite, though. With that said, about the things I love, we're going to get into something that just isn't for me. It's not a bad thing about the book. In fact, it actually makes the book work. But Crew and Vandemar's perspective scenes, it's not in their perspective, but the scenes where we're following them as they, like, commit murder or chase someone or whatever, it's just not my thing. I don't get entertainment out of it, and I can see the setup, like each time I could see like, oh, they're describing this because this location is going to come back later, or they're describing the death of the Marquis because the Marquis will probably be alive, or his body will do something significant, or stuff like that. So as I kept going through, I just didn't see like the enjoyment of those scenes, other than emphasizing, hey, these people, they're not likable people. They are Crew and Vandemar. Like, they're bad guys, period. Like, they just kept emphasizing that over and over and over again. And then also, I guess it's just the lack of purpose, I feel, in the characters. Not in the scene, because the scene holds a purpose in the story. Pretty much most of them did hold a purpose in the story. The characters lack purpose in the scenes, other than showing what they're like. And so, my entertainment from it was not very much. And it's funny, I googled if this was horror fiction early on, because, I mean, Dor was being chased by Crew and Vandemar, and I thought that it was going to be like that kind of story where like they get stuck in a maze and get chased. I searched it as horror fiction, and some people do label it as horror fiction. I think that's interesting. It's not finishing it, I don't think it's entirely horror fiction. It is more adventure fiction, but it has those elements, especially with Corinne Vandemar, and it's rather confusing. It's also confusing. Confusing is the wrong word. It's interesting how Crew and Vandemar matter in the end, like at the end of the plot, and how they fall into space. I don't even know what they fell into. They fell into something. There was a door and there was gravity. Those were the things I took away, but the description was a bit much for me there. Door and gravity. They fell through the door. Who knows what happened to them? But it's like progressively they didn't get to kill people, and like then they got like more and more angry, and they got to kill the Marquis. He lived though. So I don't know, it's interesting. One wonders why hire them. And I have no clue. I can't answer that question. And I don't know if we're meant to be able to answer that question, but that's, my brain wants to answer. My brain wants to figure out like why them? And why are they stuck into this plot and not another plot, if that makes sense? So again, going back to the point I had earlier, I don't know much about London Below or Neverwhere. And I think because of that, I just keep wanting to like grasp at like straws about like making the different people make sense when I probably shouldn't be. So I think that's an interesting dynamic, but those just weren't my favorite scenes. And I think that's one of the reasons why I like this book less than other books. Less. It's not a bad book. I still like it. It's a good book. But I just don't like it as much as other books I read. I had a quick comment that Drunk Richard was hilarious, and Neil Gaiman doing a Drunk Richard voice for Richard and Dor was also hilarious. Neil Gaiman baited us a few times. He would give us details. As I mentioned earlier that like Mr. Cruz and Mr. Vandemar's like scene descriptions gave hints that those scenes would matter. But that wasn't always true. Like Neil Gaiman would like give you details and things that you think matter, and then have them end up not mattering, or have them matter more than you thought they would. And so he still was luring you on through the book. Sometimes I wondered if like some characters are like completely like don't matter. I wondered if like the angel was just going to be some like side plot thing, but the angel is probably the huge plot, like Islington. I probably should have figured that out given he's Neil Gaiman and he has a lot of angels in a lot of his different works. I should have put that together, but I didn't because I'm a goof. But he definitely leads you on with different scenes and different details and different like little things. And there are things that come up that don't come back up again. And it's kind of curious. It makes your brain keep thinking, and it, again, makes it feel like it's another world that you don't know enough about, and you want to grasp at straws to learn more. So yeah. Already said that by accident. I already said that. And I already said that. Okay, let's see if I can come up with one more spoiler thing to talk about. I remember the thing I really wanted to say in this book. Richard's like roundness versus like staticness, like for period. Okay, let's put a period. Start a new sentence. My brain has been really scattered recently, so I'm trying to hold it together. Richard at the beginning of the book is presented as a personality, and you can really grasp what his personality is like. You can see him describing his sticky note and being like, oh yeah, there's a sticky note there, and then like his brain wandering off and then coming back to, oh yeah, the sticky note, and still forgetting about the sticky note like a few minutes later. We know that he's forgetful. We know that he struggles with like perception and like stuff around him in a way, not always, but in a way, he always asks questions all the time, and he forms habits. We know this coming in, and we start to reach the point where his asking questions is getting him into London Below. And people are telling him, you need to stop asking questions. And he does it every single time, consistently every time. And then we learn more details about him. We learn that he's like scared of heights and stuff like that. And throughout the whole book, the consistency of, not the whole book, most of the book, the consistency of knowing like Richard's about to ask a question and then he does is hilarious, and I love how it's done. I love how it comes out. I love how it keeps like reinforcing who he is as a person. And then you start to reach the scenes, particularly when he gets the key and he kind of faces thoughts of suicide, which is probably one of the darkest scenes in the book, but I think I may be biased because that's a really sensitive theme for me. We reached that part of the book, and you can tell he's different from how he talks, from how he stops asking those questions. And he still has fears, but his fears are different, and the way he thinks about things is different. And you can really tell the stark difference. And then when he gets back into London, he's so excited. You can see some of him coming back, but you can still tell that he's different, and he's a round character now. And then at the end, he makes the door, which that scene was really freaky. I had no idea where that scene was going, but he made the door, and the Marquis was like, "You coming back? Because I knew you would." He's great. And Richard goes back. And then it's the short story, which we learn more things about the Marquis and London Below and stuff like that. Very interesting. But yeah, the way Richard's character is built and like how Richard's character like grows through the story is a lot of the entertainment that I had. Yeah, it was fun. It was a really fun story. It's also not long. The story isn't long. Some of the chapters are really long though, which if I had to add on like one more thing that isn't my thing, it is long chapters. I need to be able to stop, but I can't stop mid-chapter. It's something that I can't do. It feels wrong. So having to go through the really long chapters like all in one sitting was sometimes hard. Okay, that is all the comments I have. I will shut up. What's new and what's next? This is scary. Okay, I don't own any new books, I don't think. No, I don't own any new books. What is next? I don't know if I'm ready for what's next, but I think I will follow through on what I said because I said I would. I still need to read, I think, 1 or 2 short stories in Arcanium Unbounded before I read the next book, so I will be doing that, but there won't be book reviews about them. I don't think Arcanium Unbounded will ever have a book review unless I read like a long story within it, and I think it's prevalent enough. But I don't think this will get its own book review ever. When I read the things I need to read, I'll start Way of Kings, I think. We'll try. We'll see. We'll see. Oh, there's art. We'll see how far I get. We'll see if I can get through the prose and like stick through these books, because it is long. This is just book 1. This is part 1 of book 1. This is part 2 of book 1. So I gotta read both of these for the next book review. So it might be a while. It might be a while, period. We'll see how long it takes me, and we'll see if I make progress at all. If I don't make progress, I might take a second standalone book just to prepare myself. Maybe. I'm just putting the possibility out there so that if I do it, y'all can't tell me I didn't say so. Okay? Okay. Alright, all of that said, this has been a review of Neverwhere, and I am still probably going to look for more Neil Gaiman books in the future, but I now have an idea of the kind of writing it is, and now I know like to prepare myself beforehand for his kind of style of writing. Bye-bye.